So first things first, the markets. Have you ever felt like the whole world is holding its breath, like waiting for the other shoe to drop?
Yeah, I think we all get that feeling sometimes.
Well, right now it's not just a feeling. Our analysis shows this thing called risk aversion is on the rise. Basically, investors are getting spooked, and it's not hard to see why.
Right, especially with Russia's recent update to their nuclear doctrine, that's definitely added fuel to the fire.
So, for those of us who don't speak fluent geopolitics, what does that even mean? What's a nuclear doctrine?
Sure, it's basically a country's playbook for, well, when they might consider using nuclear weapons.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. And when a country like Russia expands those conditions, basically saying they're willing to consider using nukes in more scenarios, well, it's not exactly a calming message.
That's definitely got to have people on edge.
You can say that again.
Okay, so we've got rising anxieties, global uncertainty, but hey, at least someone's feeling optimistic, Ray.
Always.
Goldman Sachs is out there predicting the S&P 500 will hit a whopping 6,500 by the end of 2025.
They're definitely feeling bullish.
But for those of us who don't live and breathe the stock market, remind us, what is the S&P 500 again?
Right. So the S&P 500, it's like a snapshot of the U.S. stock market, tracking 500 of the biggest companies. It's considered a pretty good indicator of how the U.S. economy is doing, and, what happens in the U.S. tends to ripple out globally.
So basically, if Goldman's right, it's good news for everyone.
Well, it's not quite that simple, is it? A lot can happen between now and the end of 2025.
True, true. Speaking of big players making moves, the corporate world is no less dramatic. Hold on to your hats, folks, because the tech sector is an all-out battle royale today.
Yeah, no kidding.
We've got the Department of Justice going after Google, like really going after them, pushing for them to sell off their Chrome browser.
It's a bold move, that's for sure.
Chrome as in the browser that everyone uses.
Yeah, it's pretty much the default for most people.
So what would happen if the DOJ actually wins this thing?
Well, it would be a major shakeup in the tech landscape. It could really open up the market for competitors and change how we all browse the web.
Wow, so some potential big changes brewing there. And Google's not the only tech giant feeling the heat. NVIDIA, the chip maker, the ones making the brains for everything these days, analysts are practically biting their nails, waiting for their earnings report. Their sales growth has been slowing, and everyone's watching those revenue figures like hawks.
Yeah, NVIDIA is kind of a bellwether for the whole tech industry.
How so?
Well, they supply the chips that power everything from those addictive video games we all love to, the latest advancements in artificial intelligence.
Okay, yeah, that's a lot of stuff.
So if their revenue is down, it could signal trouble for the whole tech sector.
It's like a canary in the coal mine.
Exactly.
All right, so we've got market jitters, tech titans facing challenges. But let's zoom out from the business world for a minute and look at the global stage. And, well, things aren't exactly peaceful there either, are they?
No, definitely not a calm and peaceful day on planet Earth.
We've got Putin basically pushing the boundaries of nuclear threats. We've got peace negotiations hanging by a thread in various hot spots. And the conflict in Ukraine, well, it's just getting more complicated.
Yeah, it's a lot to unpack.
So let's start with Putin and Russia's updated nuclear doctrine. What's the thinking behind that? Is he just trying to scare everyone?
Well, it's a power play for sure. By expanding the conditions under which Russia might use nuclear weapons, he's basically raising the stakes in any potential conflict. It's a way of saying, don't mess with us, we're not afraid to go there.
Okay, so a show of force, but also a very risky move.
Absolutely. It's playing with fire, and it's got a lot of people very worried.
Then there's this situation in Ukraine, which just seems to keep getting more tangled.
Yeah, it's a real mess.
We've got Germany refusing to send long-range missiles. And then on the other hand, we've got the G20, the group of the world's biggest economies, starting to soften their stance on the war.
Yeah, it's like everyone's trying to figure out what their next move should be.
What's behind Germany's hesitation to send those missiles?
I think it boils down to fear. They don't want to provoke Russia into escalating the conflict even further.
That's a tough call, for sure. And what about the G20? What's driving their shift?
It's probably a mix of things. Some countries might be feeling the economic strain of the war, with energy prices and all that. And others might just be wary of the long-term consequences of this conflict dragging on.
So a combination of economic pragmatism and a desire to avoid a wider war.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment.
All right, so lots of tension, lots of uncertainty on the global stage. We'll be keeping a close eye on those developments. But for now, let's switch gears and dive back into the corporate world, because things are just as dramatic there, and we've got a lot to cover.
Always something brewing in the world of business.
Tell me about it. First up, we've got the DOJ potentially stepping in to challenge Hewlett-Packard Enterprise's bid for Juniper Networks. What's the story there? Why is the DOJ getting involved?
Well, they're worried about competition. If HPE takes over Juniper, it would give them a huge chunk of the market for networking equipment, and that could mean higher prices and less choice for consumers.
Ah, so it's another antitrust case, similar to what's happening with Google and Chrome.
Exactly. The DOJ is cracking down on monopolies and trying to ensure a level playing field.
Makes sense. And while HPE is facing scrutiny, NVIDIA's got more on their plate than just slowing sales growth. They're teaming up with Alphabet, Google's parent company, on quantum AI computing.
Now that's an interesting development.
For those of us who don't speak fluent tech, break it down for us. What is quantum computing?
So quantum computing, it's a whole new level of computing power. It uses the principles of quantum mechanics to perform calculations that are way beyond what traditional computers can do.
So like superpowered computers.
More than that, they can tackle problems that would take regular computers, like billions of years.
Okay, that's impressive. And how does AI fit into all of this?
Well, AI relies on massive amounts of data and complex algorithms, and quantum computing could provide the horsepower to make AI even more powerful. We're talking about AI systems that could revolutionize fields like medicine, finance, you name it.
So it's like AI on steroids.
Pretty much.
Okay, so some companies are charging ahead with cutting-edge technologies, but others are struggling just to stay afloat. Like Supermicro, they're filing a compliance plan with NASDAQ to avoid being delisted. What happened there? Did they break the rules or something?
Yeah, it seems like they've had some issues with financial reporting and corporate governance.
So like accounting irregularities and that kind of thing.
Basically, they haven't been meeting NASDAQ's listing requirements, which can include things like maintaining a certain minimum share price, having enough independent directors on their board, and following specific accounting standards.
Okay, so they're trying to clean up their act and avoid getting kicked off the stock exchange.
Exactly.
Not a good look for a tech company. And speaking of tough times, Boeing is dealing with some layoffs. They're planning to let go of almost 2,200 workers in Washington state alone.
Yeah, the aerospace industry's been facing some headwinds.
What's behind these job cuts? Is it just the economy or something more?
It's a few things. Demand for commercial aircraft is down. Travel patterns are changing. There are still supply chain issues. And then, of course, there's the whole 737FX debacle that's still hanging over them.
Yeah, that was a rough one. All right, let's shift gears to something a little more positive. It seems corporate insiders are riding high on the recent stock market surge, but it's raising some eyebrows.
Ah, yes, the age-old tale of insider trading.
Is that what's going on here?
Well, it seems some corporate insiders have been buying and selling stocks at, shall we say, opportune times.
So potentially using their knowledge of company performance to make a quick buck.
It's certainly raising questions.
It's not exactly a surprise, but it's definitely something that needs to be addressed.
Absolutely. It erodes public trust in the markets.
Okay, now for a company that's no stranger to controversy,
Oh, this should be good.
the social media giant founded by, well, you know who was in talks to buy the crypto firm Bakkt?
That's an interesting move.
What's the strategy there? Is it a play for the crypto market or something more?
Well, some people think they're trying to create their own digital currency. Others say it's a way to bypass traditional financial institutions.
So a mix of business strategy and maybe a bit of political maneuvering.
It's hard to say for sure, but it's definitely worth watching.
While that company is looking at crypto, Nippon Steel is flying over to Pittsburgh to try to seal the deal with U.S. Steel.
They're not wasting any time.
What's the big rush? What's at stake here?
Well, the global steel market is super competitive, and a merger between Nippon Steel and U.S. Steel would create a real powerhouse.
So potentially a major shakeup in the steel industry.
It's definitely a possibility.
Okay, last but not least, we have to mention Elon Musk, of course.
Of course.
Apparently, someone's planning to attend the launch of his Starship rocket in Texas.
Well, that's one way to make a Stuart,
Is this just a publicity stunt, or is there something more to it?
It's hard to say with Elon, isn't it? He's always pushing the boundaries and attracting attention.
True that. Well, that wraps up our whirlwind tour of the corporate world for now. From antitrust battles to potential mergers, it's clear that things are constantly in motion.
Always something happening in the world of business.